I'd like to introduce Dave Schaub as our new Executive Director for Inland Northwest Land Conservancy. Dave has an extensive background in business, education, conservation, and strong ties with the Spokane area. We are beyond thrilled to have him. I'm Catherine Hensey, an INLC volunteer who has the privilege of interviewing Dave. Dave, why are you interested in working for INLC?
Well, Catherine, thank you for asking me here today to have this conversation. I really appreciate the opportunity to get to know each other and the organization and its supporters better. INLC has a long-standing, well-deserved reputation as a great advocate for conservation in the Spokane area, 26 years of promoting conservation here. And so I'm absolutely thrilled to come on board to help support that work. Having grown up in Spokane, I have a deep love and connection with the natural environment that we live in, and I am a conservation advocate that loves working in organizations and with other people, and so it's just a great fit. I'm excited to come on board and work alongside one of my conservation heroes, Chris DeForest, and get to know the rest of the staff and the volunteers and members.
That's wonderful. Are there any particular projects that impressed you about INLC? Anything in particular that you knew about in the past
Sure.
that you want to get on board with?
Well, there's a lot that's going on in the Spokane area in regards to conservation. I sit on the Spokane Parks Advisory Committee, which oversees the Conservation Futures program, and INLC's role in supporting county-wide conservation efforts through the Conservation Futures program is something that I'm thrilled to come alongside with. The Reardon project, with its emphasis on waterfowl and preserving a significant portion of connected land, is also something that I'm excited about. I'm also really interested in trying to take the organization in a direction that conservation organizations across the country are going in, and that's towards community conservation. So looking at reaching out to the community, learning what the community's conservation values are, and understanding how we as an organization can help support the furtherance of those goals.
How did you get interested in conservation in the first place? You know, how come you didn't end up a philosopher or working for Microsoft
Right.
or something like that?
Well,
Why conservation?
I love being outdoors, and so that's at the core of why I am committed to working in conservation. I spend as much time outside as I can, and it's a place that brings me peace and joy, and so being able to work on behalf of conserving wild places is something that I'm really committed to. I grew up a Boy Scout here, and the scout troop that I was part of did as much backpacking, camping, canoeing, and exploring as we could, and so that was my initial introduction to the wild places of the Inland Northwest. And in college, I took an environmental education course that was really influential and did a lot of great reading about deep conservation ethics. And then after college, I did a long hike of the Pacific Crest Trail. I hiked from Mexico to Canada, and that was a really foundational experience for me. It opened my eyes to the vast wild lands of the American West, and it also gave me personal contact with logging operations and development and resource extraction that goes on in the West, which we're all dependent upon. But that conflict and the balance between nature and development is something that felt very real in that experience. And so I've worked as a volunteer for local conservation organizations, and I'm thrilled to come on now with INLC as paid staff.
You have a strong business background, both in education, you mentioned Leadership Spokane, and experience. Can you elaborate on this background, and how will that serve INLC?
Sure. Well, yeah, let's see. Before moving back to Spokane in 2010, I owned a green building materials business in Bozeman, Montana, which I started and grew the business and turned into a profitable enterprise. It grew to be a regional distributor of environmentally friendly and healthy building materials. And so through that experience, I learned some business sense, as well as did a lot of education and outreach. The green building industry was growing rapidly at that time, and I was responsible for kind of introducing concepts of green and environmentally friendly building practices to the Northern Rockies. So I have that business background. Prior to that, I was a elementary school teacher. I started out as a kindergarten teacher and then moved my way up through teaching math and science in middle school. And that was really a powerful time in my life. I sought out low-income, impoverished schools in inner city Seattle to work at, and it really opened my eyes up to issues of justice, injustice, and it's something that I've committed myself towards trying to address through the work that I do, is trying to help address some of those imbalances in our communities.
Okay, wow. Two things that you mentioned. One was education, and at various times INLC has been really involved with education.
Yeah.
Sometimes more than others. Do you see that as a new emphasis for us?
I sure think it could be.
Way?
Yeah. I think that this ties back to the community conservation work that I mentioned earlier. I think that if INLC could partner with local educators to help promote environmental education within the public school districts, as well as perhaps as summer camps. I'm not suggesting that INLC should start running camps and actually doing that education, but helping to produce materials and then get those materials in the hands of teachers, I think would be a great direction for us to go.
You've been involved in conservation in the Spokane area for some years, and you've also graduated from high school here almost 30 years ago. I have that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you mentioned the Scouts. Have you noticed any changes in Spokane regarding a focus on conservation over those years? And if so, how?
Yeah, this obviously is colored by the fact that I was a teenager when I was in high school, and so I wasn't completely aware of the conservation work that was going on. And I know that there was conservation work going on at that time, but it sure struck me moving back to Spokane in 2010 that there is a robust conservation effort underway here in Spokane. There are a number of very well-run, committed organizations in Spokane, and INLC is one of those. So I think perhaps as pressures on our local natural environment have increased, the response from the conservation community has increased in the last 30 years. I will say that just from a resident standpoint, growing up here in Spokane, I was not aware of the Spokane River, or when I was aware that it was a place that I shouldn't go, that it was scary or dirty. And boy, I am so in love with that river. I get out on it as often as I can. It's such an amazing centerpiece to our community. And so I feel like the health of the river is really better than it was when I was a kid.
Great. What do you do on the river? Do you hike along the side, or?
I do. I hike and I run on the trails on the side of the river, and I'm an avid stand-up paddleboarder, so I paddle the river. I also have a raft, and my wife is an angler, and so we float and fish the Spokane River. I swim in it. I was just down there last weekend with my kids swimming.
Wonderful. You mentioned a lot of other conservation activities and organizations in the Spokane area. Do you see us collaborating with those?
Totally. Absolutely. I mean, I'm a real collaborator, and I like to build community. I like to reach out and collaborate whenever I can, and so I'm hoping that that will be an effort that I can continue with here at INLC.
Wonderful. What are you mentioned this a little bit already, but some of the most important topics that INLC needs to address?
Sure.
Either in the Spokane area or perhaps beyond.
Yeah. Well, I do think that a focus on the Spokane River and Spokane Aquifer watershed conservation work is really crucial. I also think that there's more and more awareness nationally about the intersections between climate and conservation, and that's something that I'm looking forward to exploring more with our staff and supporters, is how we can conserve land from sort of a climate resilience framework. And then obviously we have a rich tradition of farming and forestry in our region that I hope will continue into the future through support of conservation groups like ours.
A sense of the future for INLC, of course, more conservation easements.
Sure.
And I don't mean to be repetitive here, but in addition to the easements,
Yeah.
something which is preserving land,
Yeah.
keeping it out of development and keeping working farms going. Any special, yes, I want to make sure we focus on this particular area?
Well, again, I think that I think the work, for example, with the Bayview to Hayden corridor is really exciting because it is part of that aquifer conservation emphasis, and so more of that I think would be great. The work around the bays of Coeur d'Alene I think will be exciting to continue to develop. I would say that in addition to the conservation work, the actual acquisition of easements, that getting out into the community and doing this community conservation work through education outreach will be a great direction for INLC to go. It will, I think, increase our visibility within our communities and engage us in ways that we may not even know where they'll take us at this point.
That's great. Seems to me that the base that you come to us from is a strong family. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your family also in order for us to get to know you?
Sure, yeah, thanks. I do have a strong family. I'm really grateful not only to have grown up in a strong family, but now have one of my own. So I'm married happily. My wife Heidi grew up in Seattle and she loves living in Spokane. And she works in international public health. She's a writer. We have 2 kids. Our son Gus is 9 years old and he's unstoppable. He goes from one athletic pursuit to the next and loves being outside, as does our daughter Hazel, who's 12. She's an avid reader and is just as happy curled up quietly in her bed as she is out skiing or hiking.
Great. Tell us about your favorite past or future activity, outdoors perhaps, with your family.
Well, this sort of ties back to our conversation just a few minutes ago about climate change. I grew up skiing, and I love skiing. I love winter. I feel...
Talking about downhill or cross country?
Both downhill, cross country, backcountry skiing. Just being out in snow, frankly, is what I love. And I feel like I'm a little bit of an anomaly when I'm in the grocery store in the middle of winter and everyone's moaning about all the snow, and I love it. I can't get enough snow, and winter can't last long enough. And it's something that I really hope my family can continue to do together, is enjoy a robust winter.
Is there anything else that you'd like for us to know about you as you come to INLC?
I think this has been a good conversation. I hope to get to know the organization more. I know that I'll get to know the organization more. I hope that the organization, its staff and supporters will be patient with the transition into new leadership and share my excitement. One of the things that I really want to do is reach out into the INLC community to learn why people are connected with the organization. And so I hope that those of you that are watching and listening and supporters of INLC will take my call when I ring you up.
That's wonderful. All I can say is, wow. I mean, we're so lucky that you're coming to INLC as the executive director. And I very much appreciate your taking the time to help us get to know you better. Welcome.
Thank you, Catherine. I truly appreciate it.